Hey everybody, and welcome back for another video. In today's video, we got the next Mandalorian episode coverage. This is episode 7 of season 2. It is called The Believer, and this is the episode right before the grand finale next week. And we kind of left off last week with Mando having the child taken away from him. And we're left to wonder, what's going to happen with that. So we're going to break down what happened in the episode and have some fun. We're going to talk about it for a little bit. And we have the lovely Sarah with us. So we start off this new episode. It starts off in like a junkyard looking place. And we were kind of confused on what this was at first. I had seen it and I thought, maybe is it like what I honestly didn't even know what we were doing at a scrapyard. But there's a reason for it. And basically, it's kind of like community service for the Star Wars world. We find Mayfield, which is the guy that Mando was looking for in the previous episode. He's also from season 1 when they did the
prison break.
Prison break, thank you. So Mando needs him for a certain reason. We don't quite know why yet. But we see him. He's told that he needs to go with Cara Dune. He's kind of wondering what in the world, what's going on. And she walks him over to a landed Slave One. Boba Fett's ship is sitting there. And Mayfield is kind of like, oh, thank goodness, you're not the Mando, because he sees Boba Fett first.
With some really nice armor.
His armor is beautiful. It's like the best I've ever seen it. Like, it's so clean, so crisp. But basically, Boba Fett cleans up well, ladies.
It's still a little beat up. He's still got some dents, but it's the paint, good to go.
Yeah, he can't fix the dents, unfortunately. But then he finds out Mando is right behind him, so can't really...
Couldn't escape that destiny.
Yeah, can't escape Mando. So we find out that Mando wants Mayfield because Mayfield has an Imperial background. Because eventually Mando is trying to break into a base, an Imperial base, so that he can find out the coordinates of wherever Moff Gideon is.
Yeah, he wants Mayfield to access this terminal, and Mayfield says, well, the only terminal that I know of is on this planet. What was the name again?
Morak.
On Morak, which they're all confused because they're like, there's nothing there. What are you talking about? And I guess there's like a undercover refinery there that the Empire is using to take. I actually don't remember what the material was called.
Or something like that.
What was it?
It's explosive. I think it was like Rhyum or Ridium, or it started with an R.
Yeah, something like that. But it's highly reactive, just like the coaxium that they used in Solo. Basically the same stuff for all intents and purposes. But yeah, so they wind up going over there. And they Mando wants at least 2 people to go in there so that there's some backup if something goes wrong. But there's something about if you scan your face there, then the New Republic will know that what your face looks like or something like that, and that you're tied to the Empire and will hunt you down. Or I didn't really fully catch what was wrong with it, but like that's why Cara couldn't go in there. And that's why Bulba wasn't going to go in there. And the other girl that's with him couldn't go in there because her name is already, highly sought after or something. Did you catch what was going on?
I didn't catch any of that.
There was something along those lines of like, if you go in there and you scan your face or something like that, you're going to be tied to the Empire and the New Republic's going to hunt you down or something. I don't really know. But anyway, Mando decides that he needs to go because he doesn't want Mayfield to go in alone. in case he needs backup. And so they wind up because they don't want to show him in his Mandalorian armor, because obviously everybody's going to know something's up if he's there like that. So they take over one of the transport trucks that's taking in that explosive material, and they knock the two stormtroopers out. They probably have a different name because they're in different armor. That's not the normal stormtrooper armor. But they wind up taking over their armor, and we see Mando wearing that armor instead and that helmet instead, which was very interesting to see and a little uncomfortable. At least for me, it was, because it's like that's that goes against his beliefs of always keeping his Mandalorian helmet on. And so then there's a lot of back and forth between him and Mayfield kind of poking fun at him, like when he took off his stormtrooper helmet. Mayfield was trying to say, like, oh, it feels so much better. I don't know how you can see in that thing. And, there's a lot of philosophical back and forth of, we're all the same. We're all just people. It doesn't matter where you grew up from and what your beliefs are, until stuff hits the fan and you're trying to find the child, and at what point are you going to hit your limit of, okay, no more? Because it used to be you couldn't take off your helmet, and now it's you can't show your face because you're not wearing your helmet anymore. You're wearing a different one. So that was pretty interesting to see.
Yeah. There's quite a bit that goes on there that Mayfield is really starting to make
a foreshadow.
Well, that too. It really foreshadows what happens later on in the episode, but at the same time, it adds a lot of probably this psychological battle for Mando himself, because not only is this happening in this season, but he's also talking to Bo-Katan, who is basically poking at him like, your belief system, could be crap. It's just something that you're following, and it's not necessarily how everything should be. And this guy's kind of doing the same. He's almost like generalizing what Mando is and saying like, hey, you say you're doing this stuff until, you really can't. And, you need to do something else. So it's really interesting how they're playing off that mental game for Mando as well, because like we both said later on in this episode, it foreshadows some stuff, and we can kind of see it almost a little more in person, so to speak. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, so
he's also friends with Boba, who hasn't poked fun at him, but he has accepted that Boba has the armor and is able to show his face, and he doesn't fight that anymore now that he knows that it belongs to him. There doesn't really seem to be a beef between them anymore. They don't argue anymore about him wearing the armor when he doesn't follow the Mandalorian rules, even though it's Mandalorian armor.
Right. Yeah. So they're driving along in this tank that they took from the Imperials, that they're transporting the explosive goods in, and they eventually, hear some craziness over the comm system, and it's like screaming and people potentially dying, and they're thinking like, what's going on? They're seeing explosions happening.
Well, they're hearing it's the other trucks that are exploding, and that's what they saw was like, all right, truck 4 is gone, we lost truck 4. Truck 3 is gone, we lost truck 3, and we don't know what truck they're in, but they're all going down.
And we eventually find out that they're going down because there's a group of pirates that are going basically tank to tank, taking them out. I'm assuming they just don't like the Imperials and they don't like them there, so they're destroying their stuff.
That's my assumption too.
Killing some of their people in the process as well, because if the tank blows up, well then bye-bye Imperials. But Mando and Mayfield need to get to this base, so Mando hops up on top of the tank and squares off mano a mano with all of these pirates. They jump onto the tank, and the way that they're blowing these things up is they're attaching thermal detonators to the goods, and then when the thermal detonator blows up, the whole thing blows up. So Mando is trying to prevent that from happening. He's having a little bit of a tough time. We actually get a interesting dynamic when he's fighting.
Well, he has the blaster first.
Yeah, he shoots a couple of them, but then he eventually throws it at one of them.
Because it stopped working.
Yep, and then when he has to do hand-to-hand combat, it's interesting because one of them swings like a pike or a spear type thing at him, and he goes to put his arm up, and when it hits his arm, it shatters whatever is on his arm, like the
armor.
But he's used to that being Beskar armor, so it would just, basically sit there. It probably wouldn't hurt him at all. But this time, he doesn't have that luxury. So he has to change his strategy really quick in his fighting.
Yeah, he fights off, I think, 2 different groups before the third one comes up, and they have a really hard time fighting that one. He winds up somehow managing to fight off the third group, and they did attach a detonator, and it's like this close to going off, and he throws it back at them, like just in the nick of time that when it gets to them, it explodes. We see a fourth group come up. They're just on these, I don't know.
They're called skiffs.
Skiffs, and there's maybe 4, 5, 6 people on each one. I don't know what species they are, but they're not human. They're some form of creature. But they got to slow the tank way down because they're about to cross a bridge and can't cross at these high speeds, and so Mayfield's like almost to a stop, and there's more and more of these guys coming on skiffs, and it's like looking like it's about over when all of a sudden, pew 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 pew. We see some TIE fighters come in to save the day, which was another really odd moment. And after they cross the bridge, Mayfield even comments, I never thought you'd be so happy to see stormtroopers because otherwise they'd be dead. So that was really odd.
Yeah, there was also another reason why he had to slow down too, is the goods were getting too hot. Because they had mentioned earlier on they couldn't floor it because it would make them potentially blow up. So they had to do that too because those levels were creeping up a little high. But yeah, so when they get back to the base and, we see all these stormtroopers, like you said, with the comment that Mayfield made, I thought it was super interesting because when they get there, like, let's say they're not wearing stormtrooper armor, they're just wearing regular clothes. There's stuff about these people that it seems like it could have been the rebels. Like, they seem so friendly. They seem like you can see them cheering on the people that made it to the base. There's like nothing really threatening about them. They almost seem like really cool people, like a neighborhood, so to speak, just a community, as opposed to like, oh, Empire, that's evil. You would have never thought. I mean, I almost bet you that if you showed that scene to someone that's never seen Star Wars before, they might have thought they were the good guys just because of that dynamic that happened.
Yeah, and the body language.
Yeah. But once we actually start moving into this base, that changes it a little bit. We find out where the actual like computer thing is that they need to find to figure out where Gideon is. And Mayfield walks up there, but then he turns around. Something bad happens.
Yeah, he backs out because it's kind of like in a cafeteria area, and he sees what used to be his former commander, I think.
Yep.
And he's not sure if the guy's going to recognize him or not, but obviously he doesn't want to take that chance, being, not with the Empire anymore, being a prisoner for the, just not good mojo. And so Mando decides, well, if you're not going in, then I will, which we thought was really odd because, Mayfield says like, well, it's going to have to scan your face. You can't, you're not going to be able to do it because it's got to scan your face. and he just kind of pushes him aside and goes in anyway. And he tries to do the facial scan while he's still wearing the stormtrooper's helmet. Again, it's probably called something else, but that's besides the point. And of course, it's not going to recognize him because he's got the helmet on. So it's a counting down from 10. The pressure's on. People are starting to look at him, and so he takes off the helmet. And he's kind of like off to the side, so they can only see like the side of his face. They can't really see him at this time. And so it scans his face, and oddly enough, I thought he would have just put the helmet right back on after it was done with a facial scan, but he left it off for some reason. And he got the coordinates to Moff Gideon while he was at the terminal. But
the part here is that it recognized him.
Yes.
That's the huge part, because this thing only gives you information if you are part of the Empire or if your face is scanned in there as Imperial. So we learn that somehow Mando has Imperial affiliation. He didn't want anybody to know it, but just like when we talked about before, when him and Mayfield were talking, and Mayfield said, when it gets down to it and you have to really, change your ways, he didn't want anybody to know that, and he had to make that decision right then and there to change that. And although later on Mayfield basically says, like, if you help me, I never saw this stuff. It still took guts for Mando to say, basically put it out there to somebody that he's Imperial.
Well, and to show his face to anybody, because at this point he's not wearing the Mandalorian armor. So it's not like anybody but Mayfield knows that this is a big deal. Everybody else just thinks it's normal. But obviously to him it's a big deal, and Mayfield sees it and knows it's a big deal. Can't believe I almost skipped over that part.
The next part, so, back to what you were saying with the, like, people were starting to look at him. One person that looked at him in particular was that officer that Mayfield had said was his officer. And he's definitely an Imperial officer. Like, he's, I don't know if I would say snippy, but he's to the point. He's like, basically like, soldier, what are you doing type thing. And Mando's not responding. So the officer gets out of his seat and starts walking over to Mando and basically keeps addressing him, but Mando is ignoring him. And eventually the officer's like, hey, don't ignore your superiors, kind of a thing. And they have that little bit of attention, and the officer's asking him, like, what's your TK number? That way he can identify who Mando is. And Mando doesn't say anything, and Mayfield kind of swoops to save the day. He says, oh, he's just with me. It's okay. It's all good. And then
tries to say he's hard of hearing.
Yeah. And then it gets a little bit tense. It seems like it's not going to work. And then all of a sudden the officer's kind of like he almost like flips a switch. It's like, you're the only ones that made it back. Let's have a beer, kind of a thing. And then they sit down and chit chat.
Yeah, and that was at a very interesting moment, because at this point Mando still has his helmet off. You've got the guy that's trying to have a beer with them. They got their coordinates. They want to just get out of here. But they can't make a scene because, that would be bad too. You've got the commander who has a southern accent, which I thought was very interesting because we haven't really heard that style accent before in the Star Wars universe. At least I haven't. And then you've got a back and forth between him and Mayfield about a certain operation that was a very touchy subject for Mayfield.
Yeah, just to kind of give you an idea, I guess, of what this officer was like too, as well. A character from something else that really sticks out to my mind is if you've ever seen the remakes of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the sheriff. I don't remember the actor's name, but he is iconic, and that's the kind of guy that I feel like that this guy was almost emulating. If that, bless his heart, he's rest in peace. He's dead, but if he was alive right now, I bet he would have been a perfect person to play that character. Um, so that kind of gives you an idea of what that guy was like and the tension that he created with these two characters. But like Sarah mentioned, there was this operation that Mayfield was talking to this officer about, and that was Operation Cinder. Now, this has not been mentioned in live action stuff as of yet. There was rumors before Mandalorian season 2 was released that there was going to be something intertwined in this series that was from Star Wars Battlefront 2, which is a video game. This is where it happens. Operation Cinder was an operation that the Emperor created. So like he put an operation in place. It was like a backup plan. It's if I die, this is what you do. And it went as far as the Emperor made recordings of himself and put them in like these robots so that after he died, he could still give commands on how to make this thing go into motion. So the way Operation Cinder worked was that they made like these big weapons that orbited planets, and what they did is they messed with the weather of the planets and just destroyed a bunch of stuff. And the reason why Mayfield is upset about this is because the Emperor not only was targeting, the Republic and its citizens, it also targeted the Empire's forces that were still dismantled in those cities. We all know the Empire is kind of in shambles when the Emperor died. So there's still those troopers lingering, but when they unleashed Operation Cinder, it killed them all, no matter where they were. Whether it was Imperial, Republic, citizens, whatever, they died. And Mayfield is basically talking to the captain about this, or the officer, and the officer basically just doesn't care. He says basically it happened. The New Republic is dismantled. It's in disarray. I think that's the word he used. And basically the Empire is becoming more and more above the Republic. It's stronger, so to speak.
He tries to make it seem like the death of the few was for the good of the many.
Yeah.
But it's not that it was a few. It was quite a bit. It was a lot, at least according to Mayfield.
I believe it happened to like 5 or 6 planets, something like that. So there was at least 5 or 6 cities that were just basically blown to bits. So yeah, a little tidbit here. We do plan on doing some gameplay for Battlefront 2 with the story mode. So stick around in the channel for that, and you will actually see Operation Cinder take place. So look forward to that if you have not seen that yet. But yeah, back to this interaction. Basically, this back and forth keeps happening. The tension is growing and growing and growing, and you can really see it on Mayfield's face that he's thinking about something, and he's thinking hard. Like he's really upset with Mayfield and what he's hearing and how much the Empire really doesn't care about its people.
That Mayfield's upset with the officer, right?
Yeah. Yep. And
the officer winds up because he's trying to figure out something to toast to, and so he eventually just toasts to the Empire. And I think at this point, that's when Mayfield just snapped. And
yeah, he does the unexpected. I think I talked over you. What'd you say?
Oh, I said at this point, that's when Mayfield just snaps and shoots the officer.
That's the important part, because he just blasts him, and everybody's just looking at him like nobody does anything. These stormtroopers are just like in disbelief, like what just happened? Because he like looks at, I think, like 3 different stormtroopers, and they hardly even budge, and then all of a sudden Mayfield just starts shooting all the stormtroopers, shooting up the base.
Yeah, so they're just going crazy. It's like, all right, time to get out of here. So they wind up going out a window and like edging their way along a window edge, trying to find a way to climb up the building. You've got Cara Dune and Boba Fett's other lady friend. I gotta figure out what her name is.
Yeah, we gotta figure out her name.
They don't ever say it, so it's hard for me to remember. But you've got them way off on a cliffside, sniping down some of the stormtroopers that are trying to shoot at Mando and Mayfield. And eventually they do get up to the roof line, and that's where Boba comes in with his ship, and they're able to hop on. And Mayfield says, "Give me your whatever rifle." And it's a really skinny one. Like, it looks like a stick.
Yeah, like
It looks real small. But so he uses that while they're flying away to shoot at the truck with that explosive material in it. So the whole base just goes.
Yeah, the whole base gets blown to bits. And then they take away on the Slave One. Boba Fett picks him up, and basically the operation is over.
They shot down a couple they didn't shoot him down, but they destroyed a couple TIE fighters on their way out too.
Yep, Boba flew way up high, and we see something that we had seen in Attack of the Clones that this ship can do, and he drops a seismic charge. And what that is it basically gets rid of all sound and then just explodes. And it happened to hit the two TIE fighters that were flying right next to each other, because if you don't know what the seismic, how it works, basically when the charge blows up, it spreads like horizontally, vertically, just in two different directions. It doesn't like make a space like an explosion, like if you threw a grenade that does a big, like it covers a lot of area, whereas this one is just a flat plane, so to speak. So they got lucky on that one. I still baffles me how well that thing works. I know whenever I used it in Battlefront 2, I missed all the time. So it's like, geez. But yeah, so they regroup. They get back with Cara Dune, and they get back with Boba Fett's assistant. We'll just keep calling her that until we remember her name. But they regroup, and they find they're all good to go. They got the coordinates. And Mayfield basically goes like this, and he says, all right, take me away, put me back in where I'm supposed to be, because I think we forgot to mention that they didn't like offer any payoff to him. They just
said, better view.
Yeah, they said, you're coming with us, and then you're going to be put right back, basically.
Well, it sounded to me like they were going to take him to a different prison with a better view, so you wouldn't have to do like the manual labor or something like that. Just, you're still going to be in prison, but it won't be as bad.
Oh, I thought they just meant he was going to go see a different landscape.
Maybe.
But the important part here is that Mayfield is basically saying, I'm ready to go back. And Cara basically says, well, I think Mayfield died in an explosion on Morak. And he takes him a second to realize what she's saying. And she's basically telling him, like, just go. Don't say anything. Don't, bring attention to yourself. As far as anybody knows, you're dead. And that's their way of allowing him to basically get out of being in prison.
Yep.
And then after that, we cut to Gideon. We get our little snippet. We both know that that's my favorite character, so I love seeing him in the show. And you pointed out something very, very cool about this scene, so we'll go ahead and let you talk about it.
Yeah, so the female officer, which I think is the same one that told him they put the tracking beacon on not Boba's ship, but on Mando's ship. I think it's the same officer, but she says, we got something for you to see. And it's a hologram of Mando saying, you have something that I want. You have no idea what it means, or it means more to me than you'll ever know. I think that's what it was. And then he says a few other things, but that was something that in the last season was something that Gideon said to Mando about the child.
Moff Gideon, you have something I want. You may think you have some idea what you are in possession of, but you do not.
You have something I want.
Who's this guy?
You may think you have some idea what you are in possession of, but you do not.
So it was kind of neat to see, Gideon said it to Mando last season. Now it's Mando saying it to Gideon this season. And I didn't even realize until we started recording that next week is the finale. That's nuts to me. It's going to be very interesting how they wind up ending that, whether he does or does not get the child, because we've only got one episode left to find out.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that more and when I give my final thoughts about things. But yeah, I'm very curious how this is gonna end. One other cool thing, because that is the end of the episode after that scene. But one other cool thing I wanted to point out that we really hadn't seen before. So it was kind of confusing that from when I saw it the first time, and that is when they're getting ready to leave in the very beginning. Like after they pick up Mayfield and they're about to take off to go to Morak, they have like this little meeting in the Slave One. And so you see everybody sitting, and then in the background, it looks like something's turning. And when I first saw it, I was like, are they in an elevator? Because it looked like they were rising for a second. But I was like, no, they just got in the ship. So what is that? What we get to see is from the internal point of view of the Slave One, the wings that turn. So when he lands, everything is flat. And when he gets up and he's flying vertically, the two wings on the side rotate. So what we were seeing was the wings rotate from inside the ship.
Yeah, it's still a little confusing to me, and I almost wonder if the wings remain stationary and it's the rest of the ship that moves. And hear me out on this. I think that might be because it's almost like a gyrosphere. When they're flat, the people are just sitting normal. When they rise up, they're still sitting normal. They stay the same, which is kind of what the wings do as the body moves, because the wings always stay flat, or at least mostly flat, I think. So I think it might be the body shell that's moving, which would also make sense because in a different episode we saw Boba he was either landing or about to take off. I don't remember which. But we saw that he was essentially laying down, like he was in a seated position, but he had his back down because his ship was sideways. It wasn't raised up anymore. So I think as the ship moves, the cockpit is moving with the ship, but the center part where they were having their meeting, I think that stays level, so you're always sitting normal. You're never like laying down.
I don't know, because just like going along with that, I had thought to myself, well, if it doesn't move like a gyrosphere, somebody would have had to like boost up some of the people, because they were sitting like in a circle, like on the outside of the sitting area, so to speak. And if you think about it, if you walk into a ship that's sideways, if this is the sitting area, now it's like that when it's landed. So somebody would have to like boost somebody up to get up here so that when it lifts off.
No, I'm saying that the middle part always stays the same. The middle part always stays parallel to the ground.
Right. That's what I'm saying is, I'm saying it would have to make sense to be that way. Otherwise, they would have to like boost somebody up to the ceiling, and then they'd have to be sitting weird until it actually takes off. Like, that's what I'm saying.
I think we're on the same page.
Maybe Star Wars doesn't even know what Boba Fett's ship is. Who knows?
It's something, that's for sure.
So let's move on to final thoughts and a rating. So what are your final thoughts, and what would you rate this out of 10?
Oh man, this episode was so hard for me. It's so hard for me because I don't know. I still am having a hard time with what number to give it. I don't think it deserves a 10. I don't know that I really want to give it a 9 or maybe even an 8, because it did it was just a completely different style episode. A lot of it, I think, was uncomfortable because of, you have this emotional connection with Mando. So, he's uncomfortable not wearing his armor. And then he's even more uncomfortable with not having his helmet on and having no helmet on at all. Which is, it's bad because it's uncomfortable, but it's also good filming to me because if they can invoke an emotion as a viewer, I feel like they did a good job. So I'm having that like emotional battle of do I like it or do I not like it because that's good and bad at the same time. I kind of liked the character arc for Mayfield. I feel like they really took him from last time where we hated him because he was just out to get Mando to this time where he's like, I didn't see anything here, we'll just move past this. And, obviously now he's a free man and stuff. And I'm not really worried about him coming back to try to get back at Mando because I almost kind of trust him now because he was a good part of this operation. So I really like seeing that character arc. I don't know. I think I'm going to stick with an 8. I think that it could have been done a little better, maybe with the episode pacing. Some parts of it might have seemed a little slow. But at the same time, they showed us a lot of cool things that were really different. Like even just at the base when they were in that like cafeteria area. It's just a different part of Star Wars we haven't gotten to see before.
Yeah, and that's like we've mentioned in other podcasts of this show is that Mandalorian is really starting to flesh out those different things that you just wouldn't really think of. Like when we talked about, what would school look like in Star Wars? You got that in Mandalorian. In this one, what would a cafeteria look like? We got it in this one. It keeps adding more and more of those things, and I think that's super cool that they're really fleshing out the universe. More than just what we got in the Skywalker saga.
Did it strike you at all like Solo as far as the shipment of the explosive material and some people trying to blast it down and some people trying to take it?
It was very similar. I don't think they were trying to take it. They were just trying to blow it up in this one, as opposed to Solo, where they were trying to steal it. But there's definitely some parallels, I would say. But yeah, I totally agree that the 10 streak is stopping here. We've given a lot of other episodes a 10 out of 10. This one, it was not. I agree with the 8 out of 10. That's my rating as well. I don't in my gut, if I say 7, it doesn't feel right. So it has to be like right in that 8 range. I think it goes along with a lot of the things that you said. And that's basically, on these other episodes, we had, a ton of momentum moving forward. There was some consistent action. I felt like the action here just almost seemed like it was put in because they needed an action scene or something. Like I felt like they should have just been able to just drive to the base. That's what I was kind of hoping to see.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I didn't really need that whole pirate interaction. It didn't really add much to it.
It was like a classic train showdown.
Yeah, basically. And like you said, it was basically like a parallel to Solo. It didn't seem as creative as some of the stuff they have been doing, so to speak. I think what it makes this episode really rich is the dialogue. There's so much dialogue that really propels this story. Like that's the only thing that's really new and basically adds, flavor to this episode. Because we hear Mayfield talking from a different point of view that we really knew him from in season 1. We heard him talk way more like philosophical and potentially get in Mando's head. We learned that Mando is to some degree associated with the Empire. We learned about Mayfield's background, how he was with the Empire. So a lot of this...
I'm really curious on how Mando was part of the Empire too. That provides a huge question because they've up until this point always said, he was a kid who got taken in by the Mandalore, like as a kid, right? So at what point was he part of the Empire? Because he's been with the Mandalorian since he was a kid. So where did he go to the Empire and where did he come back? Because obviously he's Mandalore now,
It's a good question. He could have, there's a potential, because I know in Star Wars Rebels, Ezra basically impersonated as a kid in training to be a stormtrooper. Maybe Mando did something similar.
Could be.
He had to infiltrate them, and so he just faked it. So maybe he's just in the system from that. But I think this episode, it was good, but it wasn't as fantastic as the other ones. I'm looking ahead because we have the finale next week. I'm honestly not as excited, and it sucks to say that because in the last episode, it was like, we need the child, we got to run and gun, we got to go get it. And this episode seemed like, I understand that, they had to, take a tank and drive across the country basically to get into a base and all that good stuff. But there really wasn't like a sense of urgency. Like, we got to go now. We got to go, 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 because we don't know what's going to happen to the child. I felt like this episode really slowed down that momentum. And I'm just hoping that it's just going to be a rush of momentum for the final episode. I really don't want to be let down after all we've been through in this season, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think to some point they were probably trying to slow it down because it was getting pretty fast. And at some point there's a limit. At some point it gets to be too fast. Whoosh, what just happened? I don't even know. And that can be a bad thing sometimes too. But like with the material, they couldn't drive that fast, so they couldn't, that slowed it down. Could they have just done a different way of sneaking in? Maybe, like if they just walked up, maybe. The beer scene when they were having the beer with the commander, and trying not to make a scene. And I'm sure they didn't want to get taken into custody, so that's kind of why they did that. But at the end of the episode, when they let Mayfield go, that part feels slow too. And that's a part where they definitely could have, like, all right, let's go, and they didn't. At least not as fast as if somebody had my kid, we'd be out of there. Like, all right, Mayfield, bye.
Yeah. I don't know. It could be me. I mean, I do think that is what happened with this episode. I still think there is potential for my guess or my theory to come true for the next episode. I still got my fingers crossed on it, with a big epic coming together, because all it really takes, especially now that they have the coordinates of where Gideon's at. All they have to do, because Kara is associated with the New Republic, all she has to do is transmit it to them, and everybody could come together. And if Mando still has communication with Bo-Katan, she's looking for him. I don't know if she knew. Yeah, Ahsoka too. I don't know if Bo-Katan had the exact location of where Gideon was, or if she just did she get anything? I don't think she did.
No, because the guy killed himself before she could get any information from him. But she is still looking for that Darksaber.
Yeah, which means she's still looking for Gideon. So if Mando communicates with her, I could see that. I could see all of that happening, like just within the first 5 or 10 minutes. Like they're on their way to Gideon, and they're basically calling out to these people, sending out a signal of, "Hey, join us here," kind of a thing. They could definitely get that ball rolling of an epic finale, especially since Disney just announced all these new projects. there's a couple of them that are going to be branching off of this series. One of them being having to do with the New Republic, and this could be a part of that as well. But yeah, that about wraps it up for the episode. We look forward to next week. Like I said, my excitement has been pulled back just as much as this episode kind of pulled back that momentum. I'm just hoping to be pleasantly surprised. That's all I'm going to say. I'm really excited to see what happens, but at the same time, I'm doing my life motto expect the worst, but hope for the best. So we'll see what happens. I just hope it's not the worst. But yeah, that about wraps it up for us today. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Like this video, drop us a like if you like the video, or if you like the puggers here in front of me. Drop us a comment letting us know what you thought about the episode. Do you agree with us? What were your favorite parts? What did you think? Did you know what Operation Cinder was when you first heard it? I know when we first watched it, I recognized the name, and so I had to think about it for a minute, but turns out it is what's from Battlefront 2. And again, we will have footage of that story coming here in the future of the channel. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.